All right, let's go ahead and jump into this for our lesson next week for Family Day. And of course, take time to celebrate with the people that are in your class and continue to talk about 3151 and let even our guests know that we've been having a good time learning some of these things, especially the gospel presentation. And it's a great opportunity even for our guests to be exposed to the principles and truths of Romans 5:8, even in the context of introducing our lesson. In James chapter 4, we will be talking about some very practical and important things. A lot of this has to do with the issue of our pride versus humility. And once again, James is hitting on the theme of being humble. But how do you characterize our society's view of pride and humility?
It's the complete opposite of what Scripture says.
That's a good summary, Jason. It's a complete opposite of what the Scriptures say. In our society, it's virtuous to be proud and arrogant and self-confident, and yet people who are humble are often considered weak and not able to assert themselves, and they're not going anywhere, right? But again, as Jason suggested, that's just really the opposite of the biblical teaching. And James is going to jump right into that, those principles about pride versus humility. So there are four simple thoughts that for us to be committed to living out God's will, first of all, it's through humility. And in this passage, verses 6 to 10, James is telling us that there are true challenges when the devil, when Satan comes and tempts us, and that we are supposed to respond in a biblical way toward that temptation. First of all, aligned with this pride versus humility, when it comes to our living a Christian life and experiencing spiritual disciplines in our life, what's true if somebody is proud when it comes to the spiritual disciplines that they should have in their life?
They want to make everybody else know that that's what they do.
Okay, sometimes they want to make sure that everybody is aware of what they're doing.
How spiritual they are.
Yes, exactly. Good. What else would affect it, though?
They're full of themselves.
Yes. But isn't it true that when we act in pride, a lot of times we don't see a need to pray
Oh, absolutely.
or to read the Scriptures? You know, there are times when we just kind of feel, and it's true of everyone that's proud, sometimes they just don't need God because everything's under control. But even those people understand when they have crisis, that's when they turn to Jesus, right? All right. How do people typically view the devil these days in our lives, especially when it comes to sin that happens?
They don't.
I was going to say comically.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
TV movies, they've all portrayed it.
The
in a
devil made
comical-
me do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
Flip Wilson.
Okay. There's the truth to that sometimes it's just lightly regarded. But as James teaches, the devil is real. Remember, we learned from our lesson last week that the devils, the demons believe God and they tremble at that. But Satan is real. And, Peter, remember in 1 Peter 5, 8, and 9, Peter warns us that Satan is a roaring lion, walking about, seeking whom he may devour, and then whom resist steadfast in faith. That's the way Peter says it. Well, James says the same thing. We are to resist the devil. And if we do, what will the devil do?
Better flee.
He'll flee, yes. But what's the prerequisite to resisting the devil?
Submit to God.
Submitting to God. Exactly right. Don't miss out that, and make sure we emphasize that. We must submit to God, then we resist the devil, and he will flee from us. But again, if a person is operating in pride, a lot of times they don't need to submit to God. They think they can handle it on their own. And the truth of the matter is, Satan is a powerful enemy. But remember this, he's not all powerful. And even though he learns the things that cause us to stumble, and he will regularly try to bring those things up, we must be humble and resist the devil, submit to God in that. All right. And if we do those things, we deal with God in grace. God deals with us in grace. All right? And so that's the next point there. And how does the gospel make us humble? How is humility related to the judgment and slander of others? Any reaction to that, just hearing that question maybe for the first time? How does the gospel make us humble?
Reminds us that we will also be judged.
Okay, good. Yes. Again, if a person is operating in pride, it's easy for them to be judgmental of other people. I'm better than they are. You know, oh, look at them. You know, like the publican with the sinner, with the Pharisee in the temple, right? And the Pharisee is condemning this person, where the publican is beating upon his own chest in humility and saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. And you know what? God deals in grace with those who are humble. But in pride, so often we think that we're better than others, and we often look at them in a condemnatory way, in a judgmental way. All right? Galatians 6:1, you remember we studied that here several weeks ago, but Galatians 6:1, you'll remember, talks about if someone is overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such a one, but in the spirit of meekness, and be careful yourself, right? That's Galatians 6:1. Well, that ties really in close to what James is talking about here in chapter 4, verses 11 to 12. So you'll want to make that connection. The whole thing is related to submission to God, right? We must be submissive to God. And this posture of submission helps us balance our life and the uncertainty of our future. Isn't it true when we submit to God and we want to do God's will that we don't have anxiety, or as much anxiety, about the future, because we know God's in control? But this is in the context even of resources. Christians using their resources to further the gospel. And so one of the things I wanted to highlight in this is the importance sometimes that we need to keep in focus, that even though we want to have an enjoyable life and we want to have an impact in the people that are in our sphere, we have to realize that really the true investment is in eternal things.
That's right.
You'll see the note there just above point number 4, where under the possible answer, we likely won't, the question, what do these verses say about the importance of leaving a legacy? And when I saw this statement, I wanted to write it down because I thought it was powerful. We likely won't be remembered for long here on earth, no matter the legacy we would hope to build. However, as unknown and fleeting as our time on earth is, we know our eternal future, and therefore focus on storing eternal treasures. And that is a humble response, knowing that we're submitting to the will of God, okay? All right, and then again, anytime you're talking about submission to God, you're talking about living in obedience to Him. And that's really the issue again. But pride, James says, once again, pride will stand in the way of us being obedient children. And so we must be careful and acknowledge that we need His strength, and we cannot do it without God. We can do nothing without God. And that is the response of a humble child who wants to be obedient. And you'll see that one statement in that paragraph that says, God reveals his will to us through his word. And when we respond with delayed obedience, we are actually responding in disobedience. I've been doing quite a bit of study, even thinking about the Christmas story. And I'm looking at the life of Joseph. It's amazing. Every time God told Joseph to do something, there's not a moment's hesitation. You know, when an angel revealed to Joseph, it was time to take Mary to be his wife and take care of her and the baby that would come, he immediately did that. When the angel said, get out of here, Herod seeks the young child's life to destroy him, it's like they got up in the middle of the night and boom, they were gone. And that was the response every time in the life of Joseph. I just say that as an example of that should be the way we respond in obedience to God. Not in delayed obedience, but in immediate obedience. All right? So I think you'll have a good time. Keep in mind there may be some people in your class on Sunday that do not know the Lord. Spend some time there with our gospel presentations out of Romans 5:8. And even this lesson can be directing them towards their need to not be proud, but to be humble and to submit to the Lord. Okay? So enjoy Family Day and enjoy your visitors that come. Make them feel right at home.